Howdy. Today I'm going to talk about the short story One Friday Morning by Langston Hughes, and it was published in 1941. So, first I'll give a short introduction and summary of the story, and then I'll dive into the characters, the symbolisms, the themes, and then end off with a conclusion. So, this story is about a girl named Nancy Lee Johnson. She's a high school student at George Washington High, and she's described as colored. So, Nancy is really talented at art, so therefore she submits one of her art paintings into a competition for a art scholarship. And surprisingly, Nancy actually won the scholarship. And that made Nancy extremely happy because that means it would help her family financially a lot because this scholarship would pay for her first year of art school. She prepares a speech for the school assembly as well because she's excited and getting well prepared for the award. And then this amazing day comes. The Friday morning comes where she's gonna be awarded and everything, and she's a bit nervous and excited. And right before the assembly, Nancy is unexpectedly called into the vice principal's office, and Nancy gets a bit nervous because she thinks that she hasn't done anything wrong, or like she also thinks that it might be some people that wanted to take selfies with her or something. And yeah, so she goes to the office, and Miss O'Shea, the vice principal, tells her that the scholarship committee has discovered that Nancy was actually colored, and because of her race, they did not want to give her the scholarship after all. So keep in mind that the committee has actually written in the letter that they appreciated the artwork, and this proves that the talent wasn't the reason for the rejection, but purely her race. So Nancy is obviously hurt by this news, and at the end of the story, she becomes determined to not let this experience keep her down. So we're moving on to the characters, and I'll start with Nancy Lee, the main character. So Nancy, she's talented in many different areas. She is extremely talented in art. She does well in school, she plays basketball, and she also sings at the school musical. We get an example of her art talent when the writer Hughes describes her art talent as having very sure lines and bright and harmonious colors. And we also get a description of her appearance. She is described as smart, brown, and pretty. And she's also described as a brown, slender girl. And Nancy, she's a proud and hopeful person. She's proud of her African American background because she's from Nigeria. And she's also strongly identifying herself as a American. And she also feels she gets really accepted in her school because the story says that she sometimes forgot she was colored herself. That shows that there were no racism in her school, or she at least did not experience anything herself. So that's why this rejection becomes really sudden and unexpected for Nancy. She's also ambitious, hardworking, because she's really good in school. She plays sports. She's involved in music and art and so on. And winning the scholarship actually shows that Nancy, she's hardworking and that her hard work actually paid off. Then we have Miss Dietrich. She is the art teacher for Nancy Lee. She teaches Nancy the art techniques, but she lets Nancy paint and draw of her own will and develop her own ideas and be creative. Miss Dietrich is also described as someone who brought out the best in her students. She was also very supportive, and she was tall and red-haired. So lastly, we have Miss O'Shea, the vice principal of Nancy's school. And she's also supportive and against racism, actually. And we can see this example because when Nancy gets rejected by the committee because Miss O'Shea says that she's indignant and ashamed about the decision, and she also wants to bring this issue to the school board. And next we have is symbolism. My first point is irony, especially for the sentence liberty and justice for all. Because Nancy was gonna say this sentence for her speech, and she believes strongly in American equality and so on. So yeah, she highly believes in this. After losing her scholarship, because of her race, she says the same words during the Pledge of Allegiance, and this is extremely ironic because she has just experienced the complete opposite of liberty and justice. So the writer Hughes creates this contrast between what America promises and what actually happens in reality, like what Nancy actually experienced. So next symbol we have is spring. So Nancy's painting, it shows a park with green grass and children playing, an old black woman, and an American flag. And spring can represent hope and new beginnings, which actually fits really well into Nancy's situation because she's about to graduate and enter a new life. So yeah. And then finally we have the American flag. In Nancy's painting, we have the American flag and a old woman who's looking up to the American flag. The old woman is supposed to be Nancy's grandmother, looking towards the flag. So the flag, it represents freedom and equality. And because of what happened to Nancy, it also represents the difference between American ideals and the reality. Next off, we have themes. And my main theme I've chosen is racism, because the clearest example of racism happening in the story is the rejection of Nancy's scholarship. Because Nancy, she wins it completely fair and square. The judges even believe that her artwork deserved it. But when the committee finds out that she's black, they change their decision, and she loses a scholarship. And in their letter, they even say that if they had known beforehand that she was colored, the situation would have been less embarrassing and also avoided. What I feel like is important is that Nancy's talent, this whole situation hasn't really affected her Nancy's talent, because her painting is still amazing, and she still earned the scholarship. The only thing that actually changed was the decision about her race. So the second theme we have is American Dream and equal opportunities. So Nancy, she believes in this idea. She even plans to talk about it in her speech because she wanted to talk about American fairness and opportunities in her speech. And her family actually moved from the south to the north specifically to give Nancy a better educational opportunity. Her family's also really hardworking, by the way. And what happens to Nancy kind of challenges the American dream because Nancy, she works really hard, she's talented, and she wins fairly, but the racism still prevents her from receiving the same opportunity as white people because the committee says that the arts school would experience difficulties because they've never had colored students. So the writer Hughes kind of showed the gap between the American dream as an ideal and Nancy's actual reality. So to the conclusion, I would want to conclude One Friday Morning with how Nancy is judged by her race rather than her talent, even though she earns a scholarship fair and square. And it also shows the difference between equality and reality because America promises liberty and justice for all, but Nancy's experience shows that these ideals don't really match the reality and America doesn't live up to it. And we also have the main takeaway, which I would say for me and the readers would be how Nancy reacts to the injustice. Because Nancy, she doesn't really let this defeat her. She doesn't give up or anything. In fact, she says, "This won't keep me down." and decides that when she's older, she'll fight so that the same thing doesn't happen to other girls. So this also connects to Nancy's last thought. That is the land we must make. To me, this means that equality doesn't just happen by itself, but people have to work hard to make this into a reality. And yeah, that was all. Thank you for listening.